Dealy job, our YouTube channel. Okay. All right, recording started. Okay, the first question is, let's have 12 words that describe texture. And the ones that he has as examples are hard, soft, bumpy, smooth, sharp, and furry. So we need words from everybody that are not those 6 words. One of my favorites is slimy. I love slimy as a texture. Who else wants to go?
Scaly.
Scaly, that's really good. All sorts of cool and gross connotations with that one. That's awesome. Who else?
Oh, come on, come on, come on.
What's the question?
Textures, they're not like the normal ones, soft, hard, sharp. Yeah.
Porous.
Porous. Excellent. There's a lot of people that have phobias about porosity. Excellent. Very good. How about my class? What's the texture?
Gritty.
Gritty. That's excellent. Very good. And a surprise when you're eating lobster. You don't want it to be gritty. That's for sure.
Crusty.
Crusty. That's another good one. Okay, so 2 people have spoken. Let's get everybody to say something. Elvin, what's a really good texture?
I had one, but then I forgot.
Think about stuff that you're wearing or is around you in the room.
Oh, is it? I mean, I don't know if this is a texture, but like grainy, like
It will take
whenever you grab like something like that, it's like, I don't know, like sand or something. I don't know what's the name of that kind of texture.
Yeah, that sounds good. Like grainy, like on sandpaper.
Yeah.
All right, great. How about over here? What's a good texture? No, we can do fuzzy. All right, that's great. How about for my class? McKenna, did you already say one?
Yeah, I said gritty.
Okay, good. How about Kira?
I know that like furry is on there, but what about like hairy? That's kind of different.
Yeah, that is very different. That's good. We ate so much of our own hair that every once in a while she would cough up fur balls in class. That was pretty disturbing. Yeah, hairy is definitely a good texture. How about over here in the far corner? Do you have a texture? Bumpy? That's one of them, but there's so many different kinds of bumpy. I'm thinking, I've seen bumpy from like a really bad, awful road that's almost like washboard ridges, all the way to bumpy from, oh, this is so disgusting, a dog that had ticks. So everything in between. There's so many different kinds of bumpy. Okay, how about Shelby? What's a good texture? While you think about it, how about you?
Sticky.
Sticky? That is a really cool one. There are so many things that are sticky, from drying syrup all the way to that stuff that you put on your dashboard so your cell phone doesn't slide around. Very cool stuff. How about you?
Is like moist a texture, you think?
I think so. I think that's good.
We're kind of getting from like just surface to material qualities. Like I question sticky, but I get it. We initially experience it through the surface, but like I thought I was just going through gelatinous and all this, and then I realized I'm describing the material more than I am a texture.
Well, and I think it's completely fine.
Yeah.
I think even when we start talking about texture, we can also talk about noise, discordant, imbalanced, shrill. Those are all textures as well. And there are sculptors who will work with the textures that we normally associate with things like sound, and they come up with stuff that you just, when you experience it, you think, oh yeah, that's what it is. And I think that there's a danger, not necessarily a danger, but I think we can limit ourselves when we're thinking just about material processes, because there are so many other things. There's a, does anybody know who the artist Paul Klee is?
Oh, yeah.
He's one of the most amazing sacred geometry / watercolor painters in the last 200 years. And almost all of the surviving paintings that he's done were done as class demonstrations. And each of them are masterpieces.
Bauhaus instructor.
Well, it's absurd to think that he's teaching a class for an hour and a half and that becomes a masterpiece that stands the test of time, you know? But he also did a series of drawings that were based on musical compositions.
Kandinsky, same
Yeah,
thing.
Kandinsky used music. He did a series called Compositions, and then what's the other side of that when you kind of are responding to each other's sound? It's more like jazz. But he would plan them out, and the planned out ones were compositions, and then the ones he didn't plan, he just kind of would put a mark on and then respond to the mark. And there are two series, and unless you see the like 5 or 6 of the compositions next to 5 or 6 of the others, they look like they're kind of the same thing, but they're not. And but he would play with sound a lot. And one of the things that Paul Klee wrote or drew was called the Twitter box, and it looks like this surreal pen and ink drawing. And then when you actually hear the composition, the music was by a contemporary composer of the time, and it makes total sense that that's the drawing. And you know, you can see that a lot of the times people try to do this with film and books. It doesn't always work, but it's really fascinating to try to shift media or genres from one thing to another. And I think that's really cool to explore. If you can explore that, I think that's great. Like when you're doing these biomorphic abstractions, playing with the texture and making it think about a texture that is primarily structural, but trying to give it a visual component or exercise, I think is really a worthwhile expenditure of energy. Okay, here's question number 2. The traditional material used for casting a final product. And this is like the bourgeois material. This is the material we always think of. In every genre, in every media, there is a hierarchy, whether or not we want to believe it, there is a hierarchy. Like for example, in painting, what is the highbrow genre of painting, medium? Oil, exactly. What is the highbrow subject matter of painting? Portraiture. The oil portrait is still the highest highbrow of painting. So from that kind of perspective, what material that would sculptors cast in that is the highest brow level? Bronze, exactly. And it is a big traditional thing. I mean, the lost wax casting was done quite a bit in bronze. There's also something called cuttlebone casting that was used to make coins in Japan. The Nara Daibutsu in Japan used so much bronze. This thing is like 40 foot tall. Used so much bronze that bronze was not available for even coinage in Japan for over 150 years. And they developed sculpting lacquer. And it's essentially real snooty highbrow paper mache, but they developed that and used wood coinage to replace the bronze because the Nara Daibutsu used so much.
Well, that makes me think I read that the Greeks at some point had, by the time that they really got into their bronzes, they had spent so much in, getting the wood to fuel the furnaces, they deforested their mountains.
Oh yeah, there were several islands that were completely deforested. Yeah, that is, on the one hand, that's kind of interesting. On the other hand, that's really sad. All right, now this is a good question. Number 3, in many cases, artificial lighting has more control and therefore is more desirable to the artist. Is that true or false? We're talking about true or false, is artificial lighting, so in many cases, more desirable to the artist?
Maybe true, because you guys are jumping.
True?
This one is definitely true.
That goes back to that,
French,
we had the question with Abraham Lincoln's.
right, French and Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Memorial. Because he showed that those 2 pictures, he actually did a series of photos. Those 2 pictures, the second one makes Abraham Lincoln look really surprised, and which I think is just, that's not very reverentially monumental to have a major figure be surprised. But as you create art, you're creating one side of a potential conversation with whoever your viewer is, and the more that you have, control isn't quite the right word, but the more that you have an impact in how you present your side of the conversation, the more it represents what your motivation is. And have any of you ever, I know all of you guys have been in exhibits and stuff like that, but have anybody of you been in an exhibit where the person setting up the show puts yours in a corner by the bathroom with no light or something like that? Just, it is awful. Nobody's interested. But the same piece moved towards the front of the initial room with good lighting, everybody will be amazed by the exact same thing. And it's, lighting plays a big part. Now, if you're Frank Terrell and your whole art piece is having people be inside of a crater just so that they can meditate and focus on the natural sun and skyscape, that's a completely different thing. But for most of us, we aren't going to be doing that. Well, this week.
In an art thing, have you ever been to the Zions Bank art thing where they put everybody in the bank building?
I went to one years and years ago.
I got stuck in a corner.
Oh, that sucks.
I got stuck in a corner next to a lady who had gastrointestinal problems, and I'll tell you, people got out of our area fast. It just did not smell good. And we figured out this, I mean, the lady actually just came up to me and in a conversation, like, apologized.
Oh, that's awful.
It was pretty awful. All night, sitting in a fart corner.
Is that was one of the challenges setting up an exhibit at a small gallery right across the street, west of there. The gallery had, it was a main room, and then you'd have this S-curve hallway in the back, trying to get everything lit, trying to get everything so that all the artists felt like they were really well presented was a challenge. And in some of the corners, we finally just replaced them with pieces that were out of storage because we didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. Because it was really a bad view. Yeah. Okay, visual texture. This is another true or false. Casting is a simple and direct process. Is that true or false? Absolutely false. It seems on paper, you make an initial, cast it out of a casting medium, and then you make a mold from that, or another cast from that. On paper, it sounds like it would be really easy, but have you guys been doing the paper casting at all?
The other class, so I'm in both groups, and even something as simple as paper, it takes a lot,
Yeah,
And
it's a
this is
thing.
easy.
Paper is a relatively easy medium, but there are so many different ways that you can screw up so thoroughly. So the answer to question number 4, casting is a simple and direct process, is false. Question number 5, visual texture is primarily experienced with the eyes. Is that true or false? Visual texture is primarily experienced with the eyes.
False visual.
Blind.
It's true, yeah. Visual texture is primarily experienced with the eyes. One of the things that we'll learn about during the texture module is that there are two primary branches of texture. There's visual and physical, but they overlay and overlap so much that it's almost impossible to completely separate them out. Visual texture will always, well, not always, but usually will have physical components that your eye is responding to. And physical texture will usually cast shadows and respond to light so that visually you respond to it. And it's very difficult to distinguish the two. But visual texture is primarily experienced with the eyes is true. Question 6, natural light is always changing and is not fully under the control of the artist. Is that true or false? That is totally true. I work with glass, and that's one of the things I have to take into account and make sure that a customer will see. Like somebody will say, well, this glass is really nice, and if I know it goes into a cabinet, I know that behind it, there's going to be a bluish shadow, and the glass will look completely different than if it goes in a door and you have orange light coming through it. And that just is an example with glass, but with almost anything you do, another good example is if your artwork on display is fronted by glass, whether you're doing painting or digital prints or whatever, if you're not aware of where the sun is, your viewers can get glare and they won't be able to even see the artwork. And so natural light is always changing and not fully under the control of the artist. That is completely true, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Okay, there's next we're talking about, the next question is compare and contrast on number 7, a James Turrell piece, Sky Space, and a Dan Flavin piece, entitled From the Chinati Project. The difference between these two pieces, and I kind of show you them. One is the James Turrell. He works a lot with the natural environment. And so it's basically a sitting room with an open sky space, so you can just see the clouds go by. And then the Dan Flavin piece, he works a lot with very industrial type feeling shapes and fluorescent light bulbs, things of that order. And so James Turrell, it's very natural, it's very warm, and Dan Flavin, it's very almost disconcerting because of all the sharp angles, and it's very blue, kind of acidic feeling just because of the fluorescent light that he uses.
I was gonna say like something sci-fi.
Yeah, it reminds me of like set pieces from Blade Runner.
That's exactly
Thing.
what he's thinking.
Yeah, and Ridley Scott is brilliant. But so in this question number 7, what you'll need to do is just write a sentence about how you're responding to Sky Space and how you're responding to the Chinati Project piece, and just talk about those things. Curves are calming. Natural sunlight is warm. Angles are disconcerting sometimes. Things that look out of balance structurally can be disconcerting, and sometimes the light, the artificial lighting, can make you feel just a little bit on edge. So, don't necessarily talk about it in the same way. Maybe you like the Dan Flavin more than the other one, and that's totally fine. All you need to do is just have a sentence about each one, kind of describing it, and then a third sentence about why they're so different.
I'm so sorry I was a few minutes late. Is this an assignment that we're doing today?
No, this is the quiz for this module.
Oh, for this module?
Yeah.
So it's not the one we took last time?
Well, it's 7, 8, and 13. It should be for the textural module.
Oh, okay. I was like, these don't sound familiar. I
Getting
just-
the answers.
Yeah, we're going over the answers to make it easier on everybody, then also to kind of prepare us for the stuff we're doing this week.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Now, can all my class see this question number 8? We have a leather jacket, picture of a leather jacket and a picture of a banana. Can everybody see that?
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Now, can you guys see this? We're looking at leather jacket and a banana.
Yeah.
Okay. These two, remember in an earlier quiz, we talked about what are the two extremes of material use. Does anybody remember what the two extremes are?
Hard and pliable. Or-
From the textbook, the two extremes of material use are you're using the material as it is to accentuate its natural
Okay, yeah.
capacities. And then the other extreme is what? What's the opposite of that?
To how to represent what it is not.
Yeah, to have it be completely different. And this question number 8 shows two really good examples of that. It's a ceramic jacket that's designed to look visually exactly like leather with the texture and everything. And then it's basically a Fimo clay banana that is designed to look exactly like a natural banana skin. There are a couple artists that do this that are absolutely astounding with it. One is Brian Christensen at BYU. He has this one piece that is a set of those really cheap kind of foamy rubber flip-flops that everybody in the dog has, and they're made out of earthenware. They're made out of ceramic. But until you actually touch it, it looks so perfectly real from this foam plastic. You have no idea that it's completely different material. And then the question is, what is the term used when artists like these two, the ceramic jacket and the clay banana peel, create a textural optical illusion? The French word is trompe-l'oeil, or it's also called fool the eye. And the computer system, if you don't spell it exactly right, will tell you that it's wrong. But when Jason and I go through, we can tell, and we'll give you the point. And one hint is don't capitalize when you put in the right word. But it's trompe-l'oeil or fool the eye, and that is in your textbook. Now, here's a question. I would like to hear a response from somebody in my class and then a response from you guys. The author states the manipulation of the surface of an object to enhance its beauty is intimately bound to cultural and historical definitions of beauty. And it says in 2 to 3 sentences, give me your response to this statement using an example of your own. Now, from my class, is that true that surface decoration is completely bound to cultural and historical definitions of beauty? And do you have an example? Anybody from my class want to take that?
I can try.
Go for it.
So what this makes me think of is back with the Greeks. It was in their culture, it was considered more beautiful to have more fat around your midsection. So like all of the sculptures of Aphrodite show her having stomach rolls. Whereas nowadays you're expected to be skinny or something like that.
I think that's a really good one. By the way, we'll make that our first code word, Aphrodite. So thank you, Lydia. That's perfect. Let's see. I'm doing a really quick attendance here. We've got Lydia, Kira, McKenna is here, Shelby, and Elvin. All right, excellent. The second code word is rubber band. Okay, from the people here present, let's have one person talk about that idea of connecting the surface area decoration to cultural and historical definitions of beauty. How does What's a good example of that?
In the book, it mentions skin scarification on like African tribal places. Skin scarification and like that bumpy texture of the skin is like considered very beautiful, and then here it's like people prefer having smooth skin. Like, yeah.
I think that's a really good one. And I don't think this applies necessarily just to surface texture, but that's excellent. That's an excellent example. There are some things that some cultures believe are incredibly beautiful, and there are other, if you take that exact same thing into a separate culture, either displaced by time or space, it becomes completely unnerving. One thing I'm thinking of is Akhenaten really loved to have his sculptors kind of move away a little bit from the canonization of the human form that the Egyptians are so recognized as today. And he wanted his sculptures to be more realistic. His face was a little bit longer. His chin jutted out quite a bit, and he had a kind of a sunken chest and a pot belly. But he wanted his sculptures to represent him as more naturalistic. But you do that in any other pharaoh's reign during Egypt, and whatever sculptor would do that would probably have a very uncomfortable last few moments of life.
So you have Marfan syndrome or something of that sort, that it's so different that they question why the originality.
Well, he changed, a millennia-old capital city to where he wanted to be, and he changed a millennia-old religion to the religion that he wanted to have. And so he did a lot of changing. And then almost immediately after he died, when people got control of his children, all those monuments were buried. And the government at the time tried very hard to completely forget about, I think it was Tutankhamun's grandfather. And so I don't know. I just think it's interesting if you saw somebody that looked in real life like Akhenaten did in his sculptures, or if you saw somebody today walking along the hallway that looked like any Egyptian in any tomb painting, it would be really disconcerting, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's because we're so displaced. Okay. Let's see. Did somebody? Oh, what is going on? Okay, Shelby saying her mic is still on the frets. That's fine. If you want to contribute, go ahead and type something into the chat, and I will read it aloud for everybody's edification. Okay, so go to question number 10. And question number 10, this shows a series of objects and the question is asked, are these natural textures or worked textures? And the thing to consider on this, natural is not necessarily you found it by a stream and it's been that way for 1,000,000 years. Natural means it came to the artist that way, okay? And if we look at question 10, there's 6 different images, and we can go down the images, and there's a couple that I will give you right away. So we have the fur cup. We have this dirt-filled room. The dirt-filled room, is the dirt natural or worked? It's natural, yeah. And then if we go down here, the car stuff, even though cars are manufactured, is this texture natural or worked?
I think that's debatable.
The artist just used the crushed cars, and so we can argue that texture is natural. So I would recommend that when you guys do this, if the computer is spitting you answers, responding with answers that you don't agree with, can you see that over there at all?
Yeah.
Okay. I would for my class, email me about it and give your justification. And if it's Jason, talk to him for clarification. Because there are some really good examples of this, like Michelangelo's Slave is a partially finished sculpture where you see the torso and body, and it's caught in the process of being carved. And so most of what you're seeing is worked texture. And even the areas that look like they're natural, that's what's left after he chunked pieces off, you know, or his staff. Because Michelangelo had a whole bunch of hangers-on that did a lot of the work that he designed. And then the last question, number 11, standing man with outstretched arms. What you need to do with this is basically just respond to this sculpture. One of the things I really like with sculpture, there's a lot of sculptors that will do things designed specifically to look like they've been there for 1,000,000 years or thousands of years. And this, even though it's very contemporary looking, very industrial looking, has that kind of textural feel to it, I think, that almost makes it feel like somebody walked around the corner in the Carlsbad Caverns and found this sitting there. It almost feels like it's hundreds of years old. So I look at this and think about it, and then talk about how the texture makes you feel. And that's what that assignment is. So does anybody have any questions about things that we zoom through like lightning on this quiz?
I was just gonna say that piece made me think of Damien Hirst's whole series. I never really.
Oh, his shipwreck series?
Yeah, that I never took him seriously. But then the whole shipwreck thing, I stopped in the whole mythology that he created in that set.
I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah.
I thought it was amazing. And it is the first time that he had so many negative critiques, which I think reading what the critics had to say about that and why they disliked it, I feel that they completely missed the point. You know, he was today with everything shifting so rapidly, like social media interests and AI programs feeding you information, not to give you news, but to bolster what you already are predisposed to believe. You know, these kinds of things, what Damien Hirst is dealing with is the reality of what mythology truly is. And it's not, and I'm using air quotes out the wazoo, it's not the folklore of cat videos on the internet. It is mythology. I got in so much trouble. I'll tell you this. I was in Sunday school once, and I used the phrase "the Christ myth," and people were so angry. Myth is not fantasy. It isn't pretend. In fact, myth is a layer of reality that's more important than the reality that we experience. Myth is what all of us use to define and catalog our experiences so that we can understand the universe. And so when I say something like the Abraham Lincoln myth or the George Washington myth or whatever myth, what we're talking about is the reality of the thing and the impact it has reverberating out to an unreal extent. And I think cat videos on the internet represent this kind of layer of desire to avoid connection and interaction. They represent a way to kind of avoid interacting with the universe. And what Damien Hirst did with that shipwreck series, and I can't remember what the real name of it was.
Yeah, exactly.
But he was tying back to this idea that the things that define us as human beings are linked back to stuff that is primal and visceral that we don't even recognize. It's almost impossible to articulate because they are so much a part of how we process reality. And I thought that's why I got excited about that show.
So if you haven't seen it, check it out, because Hirst, this billionaire, whether or not he actually, they just say
one of his sculptures is a human skull with 1 carat diamonds completely coating the surface. So yeah, I would say he's a millionaire.
Yeah, the most expensive piece of art, but he created this whole series and projected it as if it were found from the sea and pulled out. And isn't that what you got? That
Yeah.
he tried to sell it as real.
He was presenting it as, I never got the point that he was trying to push one over on people, but I got the very strong, I mean, it's really obvious that he is creating things as if they had been found and rescued from the seabed.
There's a band called Manor Astroman that says that they're from another planet. They're like a surf punk space band. And you talk to them face to face, and they never drop the mythology. But you know they're just from Jordan.
Well, it's like
that
Devo.
same thing.
Devo was the same kind of way, yeah. Preaching the de-evolution of society. And yeah, they never, as long, or Blue Man Group, they never lose that, their ongoing narrative. Yeah, I think that's hilarious, but I really love that exhibit. And there are a couple people that do that, but that's how this piece makes me feel. And whether or not it makes you feel the same way, it doesn't matter. What you do need to do is write 4 to 5 sentences about how it does make you feel, how it does make you respond. And when we're talking about things like that, opinion answers, the point value comes from whether you're able to articulate and express what you're feeling as opposed to whether or not you're right. All right, does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
My class, does that make sense to you guys? For those of you that have microphones which work. Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, McKenna. I felt like I was in a cave with only crickets. Okay, for the textural module, I apologize to my class. My internet was down all weekend, and I don't know if I told you, but when I called to find out what was going on, I was told to check on the website for updates, and they would restore internet accessibility today sometime. I just thought it was funny that having the website down, or having the internet down, they still expected me to access their website. Okay, we're going to be doing this module. There's been different iterations of it, and what I will describe to you is what Jason and I are hoping to accomplish with this module, and it's not the same as what you have written down. I think I did rewrite it in my class. If you guys want me to send what I rewrote before you leave today, give me your email addresses and I will email it to everybody. When I get to work and have access to the internet, I will email it to you. There are 2 things that we're dealing with that both deal with surface texture and the visual response that people have to artwork. I realize that sculpture is very heavily weighted towards people with physical abilities where they can see stuff and touch stuff. And sometimes it's not always fair. Everybody doesn't have access to the artwork. There are artists, there are some Russian artists that deal with soundscape in a physical environment that do just absolutely astounding stuff. So you can experience the sound as it alters in the space that you're in. The Getty had an exhibit on that kind of realm about 10 years ago that was really fascinating. But for the most part, what we're talking about is going to be from the viewpoint of physical accessibility and visual accessibility. The 2 things that we're talking about is physical texture as it becomes visual, and then also color. And one of the things we talk about in the next quiz is about different kinds of color relationships. And I'm going to go to that quiz really fast. I will, let's see, I think I'm going to do a screen share as well so that my class can see it. Do you guys have access to the Module 6 quiz? No. Okay. Then what I will do is show this on here. And for my class, I'm going to do a screen share really quick. Okay. Can my class see this as I'm going through, starting to show?
Yeah.
Okay, can you guys see this? All right. Let's see. Okay, question number 5, the next quiz, it talks about different types of color use. And the things that we talk about are monochromatic, analogous, complementary, split complementary, triad, tetrad, and achromatic. And I'll go through and I'll just mention what each of those are. Monochromatic, what do you think monochromatic has to do with? Single color, exactly. And I think that something like this, Andy Goldsworthy's Rowan leaves, we have kind of a nice blend from yellow to orange to red, and it almost seems like it would fit that. But when we go down to the example of this, can my class see this red bottle? Yeah, all of these colors, they're right close together. They're almost the same color, and that's what we're talking about when we're talking about monochromatic. So I'm going to go back up. Okay, the next one is analogous. Analogous is when stuff that's not the same color starts reading as the same color. We look at these things, and I think that the closest to this is probably going to be this one, where they're all warm things. They all fit together because they're warm. Yellow, orange, and red are all warm colors. Now this one, even though there is color in gray, which do you think that this would fit out of all those? These are different shades of gray. Monochromatic. Actually, we talked about monochromatic down there, but from the point of view of gray as a color, it would be monochromatic, I would think, or very close, or at least analogous. But in this situation with these, we're talking about achromatic because they're all shades of gray. Now, if we go down to this one right here, we have kind of this blue turquoise background. This is a Sandy Scoggin, The Dream of the Goldfish or whatever, Attack of the Goldfish, something like that. We have a blue, what's that? Revenge of the Goldfish, thank you. And this, it has a blue background and they're all orange fish. So which kind of color scheme is that? Complementary. Excellent. I'm sorry, Lydia, what were you going to say?
That's what I was thinking.
Excellent. Now, let's see if we can find an example of a triad. What would a triad be?
Primary colors or a triad?
Yeah, the triad are 3 colors that are spaced evenly around a color wheel. And I have a link on this module for my class that just comes to a really simple color wheel, and you can pick like one of 4 different color schemes, pick a color, and it will show you what the other elements are to that. And so that's what we're going to be doing. And I'm going to, so we look at all this, we look at a 4-color sentence. That tells you what it is, kind of, almost, but not quite. Because even though it says 4-color sentence, there's actually 6 different colors there. And this one is achromatic. There's no color scheme to it. And then, oh, I'm sorry, this was the 4-color sentence. This is obviously a tetrad because there are 4 colors. I'm sorry, I'm a horrible teacher because I was looking at the wrong title. Evil twin is this one that has absolutely no color scheme to it. And it's just it's almost, if you're all about color balance and color theory, it's almost nauseating, which is what the guy was going for, so it's successful. It looks like an insane 4-year-old started playing with all their little dolls. But no judgment is made regarding the effectiveness of the artwork. Okay, can my class still see what I'm doing as I'm going through everything? Am I still sharing my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm getting to texture tiles, and this should have the screen share on this. Or not the screen share, I'm sorry, the website. Talk about texture, and I come down here. Okay. Now, tell me, my class, tell me, do you guys see this color wheel site?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. All right. This is the site that I'm linking everybody to. And on this, what it shows is you can go to this box, and it has 5 different options that you can pick for the kind of color scheme that you want to see. And the 5 options are complementary, like we talked about. That's the blue and the orange. Monochromatic, where it's like all shades of red, for example. Analogous, which is that the rowan leaves, where it goes for all the warm colors that are together, they kind of blend to each other. The triadic, where it's 3 evenly spaced colors, and the tetradic, which is 4 evenly spaced colors. And on this, like I said, I'll email this guy to you guys so you can see this. But on this color wheel, you can pick one of these. This one is complementary, but then you can take your mouse and point to a principal color, and then we'll show you what the complement is to it. And this is to just help you get an idea of what's going on. Because what you'll actually be using, and I'm going to turn off screen share so we can go back to video. For this exercise, what you'll actually be doing is going to a paint store. We went to Home Depot. And when I mention paint stores, it is not a paid advertisement for the paint store. I'm just saying that's a potential option. And we found, oh, how can you see? Oh, there we go. We found all these free guides on color. And we were very careful to look at just kind of the responses of the people at Home Depot as we were going through. And just as their hackles started raising, we quit taking the free stuff. So, and it looks like the salespeople's limit is 4 of the large guides and 3 of the small ones. And what I would recommend is I'm going to do this at Lowe's tonight as well, and at different Home Depot. I'm going to go back. You can also find free stuff like this at Hobby Lobby. They will have these little free 1-page guides that you can grab. And what you're looking for is not any information. I don't care about the information, because what you're going to be doing is making 6 3-inch by 3-inch squares where you'll just cut out different things and make a collage. What you're going to do is go to this website, pick 3 different color structures, like maybe complementary, triad, and tetrad. Then you're going to cut out 6 3-inch by 3-inch cardboard squares. And you're not going to spend very long. I want you, for the entire process for color, I don't want you spending more than like 2 or 3 hours. And that includes, getting these, designing it, cutting the things out. And then I want you to make 2 collages for each of those color schemas using this free stuff that you're cutting.
Okay.
And so, for example, maybe one of them that you're doing is complementary. So we have some really nice greens. So I'm going to cut this page out and a couple of these, and I'm going to use, actually, can you see that? The reds from here and the greens from here, and make myself a collage, 2 collages. So you'll use a little glue, you'll use tape, you'll use whatever you need to, hot glue, whatever. But these are great, these color guides from Behr. They also paint chips. Go, if you know what, before you go to the paint store, if you know what the color schemas are that you're going to be using, just go over to a couple different aisles. Try to do it in more than one aisle so they don't freak out and think you're stealing everything, because you're not, you're free. But a couple things, those strips of different paint colors, and take those and cut them into different shapes and use that to make your collages.
So the collage is 3x3 or
The 3" by 3" collage, yeah.
Oh, so it's
Yeah.
super tiny.
Yeah, super tiny.
And 2 of each of our,
So you're going to be doing two complementary ones. You're going to be
Yeah.
doing two analogous ones. You're going to be doing two monochromatic ones.
so these should be quick.
They should be pretty
Yeah,
quick. Yeah.
Quick little things, because we're gonna be making a whole bunch of little 3-inch.
Yeah,
squares.
you're just making 6 of these, and
Okay, so starting-
yeah, the achromatic, I think it would be totally decent to do that with maybe the warm color backgrounds, and then you can also find like different whites or different grays, different things like that.
Yeah,
So this is designed just to get you thinking about color use and how that makes for very visual texture.
What kind of shapes are we cutting out? Just
Doesn't
whatever?
matter, whatever you want.
Is this for next week?
This is doing this part of the module. Okay, so throughout this week, basically. And then what you're going to do is put that together as a cube. So you just have a 3" by 3" cube. And you can do that where you have 3 faces connecting to each other. There's going to be monochromatic, achromatic, and tetrad, and then do the opposite on the other side. Or you can play with it however you want.
Is this an assignment that we already have, like, in?
This will
Canvas?
replace whatever's in there. That's why I'm going to
Okay.
email you the stuff.
What's on there right now is like a cardboard.
Right, right.
Okay.
This is part of that, and I'm simplifying what we have there, and we're also going to be doing that.
Okay.
So, like I said, before you guys leave, and you dudes, for my class, I'm going to be done with this in just a couple minutes. Ask me questions, and email me questions and everything. We'll talk about it more. But since you guys do have the module, I hope it makes a lot more sense. Okay, so that's one aspect, that we're dealing with visual texture. Okay. Now, the next aspect is there's a couple things that I want you to do. And these are all things that are going to be done throughout from now until the weekend. Okay. And some of them I would recommend doing right away, like today, maybe tonight, going to some of these paint stores, craft stores, things like that, collecting those materials, looking at this website, checking it out. In fact, when I leave here, I'm going to go to work. I'm going to use the internet at work, and I'll send this to everybody. Okay, so you'll have it right away. But and then there's 2 more things that we're talking about, and then we're going to be working on them a little bit here. So if you want to bring those materials here tomorrow that you collect, then we can work on it here.
that was gonna be my other
Yeah,
question.
yeah,
Okay.
very, very definitely. So does everybody kind of get an understanding? I know it's not going to be completely clear. I just want you to have a little bit of an understanding so that when I send you the email with the information, it'll make more sense. Okay, so basically, again, 3 or 6 3" by 3" squares. You're making simple collages. Each of them should have at least 3 different pieces of material glued to them. But you're going to be doing, say, 2 squares complementary, 2 squares analogous, 2 squares tetrad, where maybe the complementary 1 square is purple and yellow, and the other one is turquoise and orange. It almost doesn't matter. Whatever you want to do. If your thing is just cutting out the little squares of different shades of color and putting them together, that's totally fine. If you're going to be a little bit more creative with some of these free craft guide pamphlets that you can get and cut out images of that's fine too.
What day is this due?
Everything is going to be due at the same time, and we're working on it tomorrow.
Okay,
So
so just tomorrow.
yeah, I would really like if you guys can get your stuff together so we can work on it tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. That'd be awesome. I'm sorry, I really appreciate the fact that you're asking questions because my brain operates like a pachinko machine and I'm thinking of usually about 17 different things at once. And so if it doesn't make a lot of sense, make sure that you ask me questions so we can get back and address that. Because I am planning on circling around and addressing it again later, but usually normal people have switched gears by then. Okay, now, so that's one aspect. All right. Another second aspect is, this is a meditation that I use. I worked with people that have issues of anxiety. My kids have anxiety, and there is and depression as well. There's a meditation that I like to use that seems to really help, and it's a sense journey or a senses journey, where you pick an environment to explore, and then you give yourself a set amount of time, and you can do this in as little as 10 minutes. I prefer about 15 minutes or so is pretty good. And you go through this environment trying to expand and exercise your senses as much as you possibly can. So you're not, for example, if the environment you've picked is there's a park near your home that you want to walk through. As you're walking, pay attention to the ground, how it feels beneath your shoes. The color, the texture, all you can see of the grass. Feel the bark of the trees. Feel, unless you're super allergic to everything, feel as much as you can. Listen to as much as you can. And try not to pay attention to as you're cycling along, or your chair's moving along, or however, as you're walking. You can do this in your apartment, and this works best if you actually do it in a couple different environments. As you're doing this, see if you can find samples of texture that is interesting to you that you can actually collect. For example, twigs that are fallen on the ground, dried leaves, pieces of grasses, or different elements like that. If you're in your apartment when you do this, maybe there's an interesting texture, somebody threw something away that didn't quite make it into the garbage can, or you like how that soap looks, or whatever. Pay a lot of attention to just the textures. And you can do this inside and outside, 2 different spots. I would recommend doing it in 2 different spots. Collect at least 3 different examples of texture. And you can bring that with you, and then we'll kind of play with that a little bit too. Because the second part of this project is making 6 3-inch by 3-inch tiles of physical texture. And you can do whatever you want. You can explore different things. You can explore with cardboard. You can explore with, I want you to incorporate the stuff that you find. Crushed noodles make for interesting textures. Beads are interesting. Beads that are solid and beads that are translucent can be really interesting. Beads.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's an important question to ask. One person brought in a whole bunch of hairballs that they found. That was particularly disgusting. Lint is good from a dryer. No, it's actually different, which is, I don't know if that's better or worse.
I have a case. I have a plastic container with little segmented things that I can't remember who got me collecting these, but they're called tone balls. Okay, and I play guitar and I fix guitars and do stuff for other people. Well, the lint and the dirt and stuff that collects in the body of an acoustic guitar they can get huge.
Oh,
and
that's
so
so
when I'm going through and fixing up a guitar, I always get in there to see if there's a tone ball that's been kicking and rolling, and I've got a collection of them.
That would be a very interesting thing to apply to this.
So what's your job? So you teach here, and you said you have a job where you work with people with anxiety?
I do a number of things. My principal job is I'm a stained glass artist. I design, I restore, I curate. If you went to BYU a couple years ago for their faith exhibit, downstairs they have this beautiful woman in the well, kind of mid 19th century style stained glass. And I was the one that curated that and designed the box for the display and everything. And I consult, like with the LDS Church when we did the Provo City Center Temple. We have a sense of humor at work, and so we call that the tempernickel. And evidently that's the wrong thing to say when the 6.5 foot tall architect is standing immediately behind you. But just for future reference. And one of my responsibilities as a consultant was to go through and make sure that all the window designs were compatible and consistent with the historical windows. Because I worked on the restoration in the 90s, and there are actually 3 times as many windows in the present building as there were back then. So everything had to look like it fit historically. And so I do a lot of different things like that. But I'm also, after 9/11, I became very interested in interfaith chaplaincy. So I'm also an interfaith chaplain. And I'm kind of an informal, I help people calm down with meditations and things like that, but also I do a lot of interfaith work, and sometimes that's really good to start off like a meeting so that you're in a space of calm. So when people start addressing differences, it's a lot more difficult for hackles to get raised. And then several of my children have anxiety issues, and so there's a lot of all that kind of stuff.
That's really cool.
Well, thank you. A couple of years ago, I received a fellowship to study Islamic art in Iran, and that was so viciously cool. That was incredible. I have never left the country going down the gangplank to the airplane where you have Border Patrol agents lining the walkway holding machine guns. And that's for leaving Texas. That was really unusual. And I did not realize why I was there until after I got home, how close I actually got at one point to getting thrown in prison. But what was really nice, the universities that I worked with kind of kept me sheltered, kept me safe, and that was really nice.
I've heard that people are just incredibly kind.
It is,
Like,
if there was a way to get further away from 100 than 180 degrees from how things are represented in social media,
yeah.
that's what it was. It was so far away from what everybody was telling me to expect. I felt safer at 1:30 in the morning in downtown Tehran than I do at 11:30 at night in Salt Lake. And one of the fascinating shifts at the very beginning, the first couple of days I was there, I was treated like the kitten with a septic hip. Everybody felt pity for me. Everybody was, and one of the first meetings we were in, we were talking with a couple of people that were talking about the philosophy behind Islamic art. And thankfully, English is spoken more than Arabic, and English is like a required language there, and so everybody understands you, almost everybody. And it made it a lot easier because my extent of Persian included, thank you very much, I'm sorry I don't understand, and please show me the bathroom. That's the most important things, And I found that I'm sorry and thank you were universally appreciated by people. Just, as soon as they understood that I wasn't really facile with the language, then they were super nice, kind. But as we were talking, these guys were going on about philosophy, and I started talking about making reference to Ibn Arabi and Attar and Rumi, and the professor started looking at me a little bit differently. And I just happened to mention at a conversation with Dr. Nasser about this and that when I was working on this museum exhibit. And they said, Syed Nasser? And I said, yeah. You know him? Yeah. You talked to him? Yeah. He's the founder of our university. And suddenly it shifted from being treated like the pitied kitten to almost a celebrity. And it was really nice to float on that for the rest of the time I was there. But that shift, we don't realize how much the assumptions people make about us affect their treatment of us and our treatment of them until we experience that kind of dramatic shift. And that was really cool. And it got to a point where other people in this international group were, I would just be visiting with one of these professors and they would come in and ask permission to join. And I realized that that is something that they do in Iran when they don't want to interrupt people that they really respect. And I thought that was such a cool transition to experience from being inside of it. And it really made me realize just a number of assumptions that we make. But at the end of it, there were a couple students that had some questions about the Quran. They were from the UK. Now, liturgical language, of course, is Arabic, but it was really difficult for a couple of these imams to, well, not imams, mullahs to answer questions because they were dealing with people that had only interacted with the Quran in English. And so I sat down, I visited with them a bit. I didn't realize until later that I had, with my study of the Quran, I'd become something of a Quranic scholar. I was just fascinated with it, and I loved it, and I think it's a beautiful work of scripture. And so I was answering their questions not from a Christian perspective, but from, well, this is what Yusuf Ali said in his translation, and this is the historical context. And when I was all done, about the next morning or so, it was after breakfast, I was sitting alone, just kind of getting ready for the day, and these two gentlemen came in and sat really close to me on either side. And we started visiting and stuff, and they just asked about my religious background. So yeah, I was in seminary for several years all through high school. My university stuff, 10% of all my hours were spent in religious studies. I'm an interfaith chaplain and all this. And at the end, they kind of leaned forward, so they were talking to each other, and I was leaning against the wall and said, I think it would be appropriate. The other guy said, yeah, I think it would be okay. And I became an honorary mullah. This was the dean of the University of Religions and Denominations, and the dean of students of another university, Islamic School of Art. And what they had been interviewing me about was I had consulted on a religious topic with two Muslims, and I was not qualified to do that, and that's illegal.
Oh.
I had not realized that what was going on, and so they were interviewing me to make sure whether or not I should go to jail. So I walked away with honorary mullahship. But anyway, sorry, sidetrack. This is where the pachinko machine comes in. So tomorrow, what we're going to be doing also is I want you to cut those 6 3-inch by 3-inch squares out of cardboard for the color, but you're also going to have 6 other ones for the physical texture. And I want you to bring at least 3 things that you find on the senses journey that you take. And you're also going to be, if there's anything else you want to bring, that's fine, that's great. If not, several people will need to bring cardboard. I will have to bring some cardboard too, but you can find stuff here to use. If you want to bring beads, whatever you want. Jason has people usually work with paper products, so just bring extra cardboard, and you can do all sorts of different stuff with cardboard. And we will also go through a couple artists that work with cardboard, so you kind of see.
Can I use Bristol tape instead of cardboard?
I think that you probably use whatever you want. Cardboard seems to be the cheapest material that has a lot of potential. And that's why that's the default material. But anyway, our third code word is caravan. All right. It looks like we lost a couple people, but there's still 3 people there. That's great. And then when I'm talking about, for my class, when I'm talking about stuff we'll bring tomorrow, this is stuff for you guys to work on. I think I mentioned earlier when I started that I am going to be doing live stream for at least the first hour, starting at 8 o'clock for each day this week through Thursday. And this is to, if you guys need to get more attendance points or whatever like that, that's great. But these will be put up on our YouTube channel just as soon as they're done. And I'll send you guys links to that channel as well. And so when I'm talking about today or tomorrow, whatever like that, that you guys are doing online, so you can do it whenever you want, but I want you to see what the progression is of the thought process. And what you're going to be doing is on those 3x3 tiles, you're going to be exploring physical texture. If gluing your hairballs, putting your beads, whatever. And at the end of that, after we're done making those 6, we're going to spray paint them. And we have spray paint here. We're going to spray paint them the same color. And you can put a little spray paint on, you can put all the spray paint, you can make it as dense as you want. And then we're going to glue those together in a cube. So at the end of the project, neither of these things, yeah, it sounds like a lot of work, but neither of them are going to take very long. They're going to be simple collages. They're going to be simple textural collages. And when you get all done, the hardest part about the whole thing is gluing it together so you make a cube. And you can design it however you want. But it's going to be a cube when you're done. And then for your discussion, to put it on your discussion, you're going to document, and you can take either 2 photos or 1 photo with these things side by side, a photo with these things side by side, and then turn it around so we can see the other side, whatever, however you want to do that. And that's going to be the thing that you put on the discussion board. All right. Does that make sense to everybody? Kind of ish, sort of?
Yeah.
Okay. So tomorrow, when you show up tomorrow, we're going to have the materials that we can actually do this. And we have the cutting mats and stuff over there. If you want to just bring cardboard with you to cut the squares, or if you want to cut the squares yourselves before you leave today or whatever, that is perfectly fine. However you want to do that. So questions and observations. One question I get is what other materials can you use? If you find wrapping paper that you want to use that fits the color, grab that. I would recommend not cutting up clothes that do not belong to you, and not cutting up magazines that do not belong to you unless you have clearly received permission to do so. That can cause issues with roommates and family members that we want to avoid. Well, most of us want to avoid. Some of us find that kind of thing fun. But there's, like, you can find magazines almost anywhere. There's also really brightly colored ones that are kind of obnoxious at the Dollar Tree. If you want to grab one of those, that's fine. You can use that for collage. But if you go to 2 or 3 of these hardware places that have paint stores, and like a Hobby Lobby or something, you'll have all the material you need visually. And I would very much recommend spacing out your gleaning of color materials from different areas, so that people don't think that it's free, I'm going to get everything. And that, for some reason, that really raises the hackles of salespeople. Now, I will say at Hobby Lobby, they also have these little hanging things that are like $2 or so, that are several page things that are little project magazines. You're just looking for the single page ones, and if they say free, grab it. And that's it. If it doesn't say free, don't even risk it. All right? So any last questions? What kind of materials can you use? Let's go around the room just really quickly. And from here, everybody talk about a material that you can use from something you find at home or on your census journey. What are some of the stuff that you can use? Shelby. Oh, no, your microphone isn't working. Shelby, can you type in something that you can use? How about Kira? What can you use as a texture?
Well, you said hairballs.
You don't have a collection of hairballs, do you?
No.
Okay, because that would be really gross. How about lint? Have you cleaned out your dryer?
Yeah, we could. I have lint.
That's great. How about you, Elvin? What's a textural material that you can use?
Pine cones.
Pine cone. That's an excellent one. Very visually striking. bark, grass, dirt, Shelby, that's really good. There, and dirt, there's a lot of different kinds of dirt depending on where you are. Like dirt collected from the Provo River is going to be very different from something you find in a garden, for example. Texturally, it's going to be very different. And that would be easy to use because you could just put like your wood glue on the cardboard, sprinkle a layer of dirt when it dries, put some more wood glue in a different outline, more dirt, and layer it up like that. And that can make something very interesting as well. So Shelby, that's a really good idea. Let's just go around the room. What kind of thing would you be interested in using? Dried flower petals, yeah. And that's really good too because there are so many different species and each of them dry differently. So excellent. How about in the corner here? Rocks? I think that could be very cool too because there's ones that are worn by water action, but there's also like really hard gravel or crushed quartzite. All of those are going to be very different. So yeah, excellent. How about you? Yarn? That's fascinating too because with everybody doing, not everybody, but almost everybody doing knitting, you know, as kind of a cool thing, there are so many different kinds of yarn as well.
I have a bunch of all things, wallpaper samples.
Oh, that'd be
Big
very.
stack of old, we're talking vintage wallpaper samples.
I would love to see that. I'm working on a project where I'm doing bookbinding, and if they're over, you know, a certain size, those are always fascinating to use in bookbinding. But you could do things like use it so that the visual surface or the texture is towards you, but also the edges are towards you. That'd be absolutely fascinating. How about you?
I'm just thinking of textiles, like lace or knit things.
I love the idea of using textiles that have holes in them and layering those. That would be so cool to see. And then if you use that for the texture tiles and we spray paint over that, how cool would that be? Very nice.
Paints.
Paint? Like what are you talking about, paint-wise?
Like oils or something, and just kind of layering them.
So you're dealing not just with the idea of the color of the paint, but the textural quality of the paint material itself. That'd be fascinating. And like with acrylics, there are at least a half a dozen different kinds of things that you can mix with that to give it different texture as well. Everything from the popcorn ceiling texture, which is everybody's favorite of any home they've ever lived in, all the way to kind of a ripple type effect. So yeah, very neat.
Pretty much stick dirt, sand, stuff like that. We probably still have, I don't know, I guess they've cleaned up. No, we still got, you say popcorn texture and there it is.
Oh, yeah,
There's
so
the phone.
lots of different kinds of things. That's great. And as we think about that, I love that because it opens up an opportunity for other things. Like I mentioned about using glue and grit from dirt. We can also use glue and layer all sorts of different stuff, like the fabric you're talking, textiles you're talking about. Leaves. One interesting texture might be cutting leaves in half and then gluing them so that just the edges are exposed. That will make a fascinating texture. Who has seen Kubo and the Two Strings?
Yes.
Have you guys seen that? I'm going to make a note and send you guys a link to behind the scenes video. Because one of the things they did for the water scenes was use heavy duty paper with torn edges. And they just moved it. You know how when you spread out your hand of cards and then you flip one card over and the whole thing interacts like dominoes? They were doing that with the edges of paper. And it was fascinating. I think that's one of the more, from a sculptural viewpoint, that's one of the more satisfying animated movies, I think. Kubo and the Two Strings. So I'll email that to people too. But Shelby and Kira, do you guys have a pretty good idea of how to proceed with this thing now?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Well, I'm going to end the meeting a little bit early today. If you guys have any questions, please email me. I'm sorry I was not able to finish catching up on grading over the weekend, but internet stuff happened. I will get that resolved as quickly as I can. And we were also going to meet, you are not required to meet, but we are also going to meet the next several moments, all right? So, several days, excuse me, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I'm going to end the recording now and post this on our channel as soon as I get to it, all right? So we'll see you, Shelby and Kira. You guys have a good evening. Hopefully you could join us tomorrow. If not, that'll be totally.
Thank you.
You're welcome.